My name is Robin Donaldson. I'm the founder of We the Peace. We're a team of trauma-informed yoga educators, healing artists, therapists, and we offer programming to Black, BIPOC youth and marginalized communities around mental health and trauma-informed care. So it's an honor for me to be here today. Definitely all of you who join, especially the Clark students, this is such an important conversation, so thank you for taking the time out. So I would like to introduce some of our panelists that are with us today. We have Assistant Professor Shakira A. Ford. She is a Morehouse School of Medicine professor, and she will be joining us today. Okay, she's on her way. Thank you. And wonderful. So Professor Shakira Ford. And we will also be joined by Dr. Dawn Tyus, African American Behavioral Health Center of Excellence, Morehouse School of Medicine. Thank you. And then we'll also be joined by Georgia State Senator Nikki Merritt, who will be joining us during a little bit later in our conversation. So just to kind of reset, if anyone has come in the room, we're having a discussion about the current collective state of Black women's mental health, highlighting policies that support resources for early identification of mental health conditions before a crisis occurs. So the first question that we wanted to address has to do with talking about the differences between overall mental health and mental health disorders. Sometimes, they overlap, or people have different understandings. So if you could just talk a little bit about those differences, that would be great. Thank you.
Hi everyone, it's really lovely to be here and lovely to be with other faculty who I didn't know we knew each other, so that's always like a lovely surprise. So one of the things that I do for Morehouse School of Medicine is I'm a psychotherapist there, and so a big part of the conversations I'm having on the daily is about mental health. And one of the things I love to sort of clarify and define is the difference between what mental health is and what mental health disorder is. So mental health is a state of being. So we all have mental health. That's a part of our emotional health, our psychological health. So that's happening as we are having our lived experience. The difference is between that and mental health disorder is when you have symptoms that start to show up that disrupt that mental health state. So if you were starting to see things that impact your relationship, it's disrupting your ability to learn, your ability to go to work, things like that. You're starting to see what we will call somatic symptoms, where it's showing up physiologically in your body. That's an example of a mental health disorder. So most of us would know things like depression and anxiety and a host of other things. So that would be an example of the difference between having mental health, which we all have, like physical health, but we all don't have mental health disorder.
And Dr. Ford did an amazing job in distinguishing what the differences are. And I just wanted to add, as a clinician as well, sometimes we overlook when we start to exhibit these type of symptoms, we overlook them and just continue to say that we have a mental health crises. But sometimes because you have mental health issues that may come up, they are treatable. And so we overlook those things, which oftentimes causes us not to seek treatment for those things. And if you don't know, the best thing to do is to ask and to seek assistance.
And do you mind just expounding upon the somatic symptoms when you mentioned that? Thank you.
So essentially, somatic symptoms is just a fancier way of saying, what are you feeling in your body? One of my favorite things to say to my clients is to drop back into your body. Come back home to your body. What are you feeling? So even I'll ask you now, if you sit here, do you notice something in your shoulders? Are you like me where you're like this? How many of you are like this right now? How many of you might notice something? I see some hands waved. How many are noticing that maybe their stomach is tight, or your back hurts, or you're having migraines, or butterflies in your stomach? I see some other hands going up. These are examples of physiological signals that we want to pay attention to. How many of you push through those things? I appreciate the honesty. Yes. So most of us might push through some pain that we have when in reality that's an example of our body trying to let us know that something has happened with our mental health care. One of the things I thought about when I was asked to do this is just the lifespan of women and girls at the beginning of their lives. They're already sort of deemed, there's a lot of great research about this, already deemed as older or more mature or less soft, or they don't need the help. And so what happens is we start to internalize that very early, that we can't just push past pain, and that's why we lead in so many unfortunate syndromes, is because we just keep pushing through and don't listen to our body. So that would be an example of somatic symptoms that you want to pay attention to that could be an indicator that there's something happening in the mental health realm for you.
Wonderful. Okay, on to our next question. At least with some of the work that I do around trauma, there's another layer to it when it comes to racial trauma and just specific issues that Black people are dealing with, on a day-to-day basis. So when you think about racial trauma and microaggressions in society, what are some laws, or how are some laws which are dehumanizing, how are they impacting Black women's mental health in the South?
So I really had to take some notes on this one because it's so deep rooted, right? And so when I started to think about racial healing and I started to think about microaggressions, I started to think about these are things that have been happening long before us. But because of generational things that have occurred in our communities, within our own systems, our families, we then begin to adopt a lot of those experiences. And those experiences we start to carry with us early on. And I'll just use myself as an example. One of the things that I've always been told is that you work hard, and you work really hard to get to the top. Irregardless, if it's something that you want, you go after that. But no one ever really taught me until later on in life that it's okay for me to say no, it's okay for me to take a breath. But these things are internalized because of the systems oftentimes impede us being able to get to the top, right? So what we're doing, we're constantly pushing within racist systems, and sometimes, again, our very own systems that have, yes, been set up before us, but because of those experiences of people before me, now I'm having to carry a lot of those because the system didn't change. And that creates a level of trauma for some Black women in our spaces of our not being able to properly care for ourselves. As Dr. Ford indicated, we continue to have these mental health disorders because we just don't stop sometimes, and we don't listen to what our bodies are telling us. I work hard, I work tirelessly, just as she does, but just to even sometimes stop and take a breather is just as important as not taking that breather to me. But also being able to, having to navigate the systems in which I thrive at work, sometimes the systems of being a mom, all of those things creates levels of mental health issues and oftentimes concerns that I have to seek assistance out. So I'm just talking about me, but I know I'm not out here on this island by myself. But as a Black woman, we often do what we were speaking of earlier. We push through, and we have to learn not to push through. We have to stop thinking that we can change every systems and figure out the most safe and appropriate way for us to try to move and navigate through that system without having to cost our own lives and our own health.
So when I think about that question, I think about, first of all, just trauma itself, right? So just the definition of trauma is when it's not tolerable for us psychologically, like something has occurred. And trauma is very subjective. If we took a poll of several people in here, there might be similar events in your life where someone had a traumatic response and someone kept it moving. So it's all based on who we are, our stories and things like that. So if you take that and then you add the racial piece on it, what happens is that daily we are having lived experience of having to live alongside and hold this trauma that comes from just holding this space of race being really just a social construct. But we know all the impact and the hurt that comes along with that. So when I think about policy that doesn't protect Black women, I'll give you something to imagine. If you think about someone who's getting small cuts every day, right? Just every day somebody's slicing and cutting you, what's gonna happen is that eventually those cuts, those wounds are gonna be infected. right? You are eventually going to bleed out if you don't take care of them. And I'm sure that that's maybe a graphic example, but I think it brings it home a lot of times for people to know that that's what's happening with us psychiatrically and psychologically when you don't pause to look at the wounds that you may have emotionally or from racial experiences. There's even really intriguing research that shows the impact of trauma on unborn babies. So if you think about and I'm sure most of you already know, there's just the generational trauma that is going, especially if you in your community, say you never moved out of your community and these things are sort of where you feel like you can't move beyond a certain mindset, a certain self-limiting belief that you can't move beyond. So if you take that as the baseline, and then you have policy that doesn't protect Black women, that is really sliding backwards, right? That is dehumanizing us and doesn't see the value and worth in us, then you certainly have really a powder keg for things to just kind of continue to be destructive for us.
No, thank you for both of you for that. And I just want to just ask you to just expound a little bit based on the previous panel and then based on your comments just now. So what advice would you give Black women in the South when dealing with harm, dehumanization, or trauma within our own families, communities? It could be from other Black men, it could be church, it could be your neighborhood. When you are trying to just live your everyday life, maybe also do some activism along the way, and then you're dealing with these systems, but then you're also seeing that reflection of those systems maybe within your own families or communities. So do you have any advice on how Black women in the South can deal with all of that?
Well, I think being able to understand what your tolerance is, right? I think being able to understand what you can and can't deal with and what you can and can't take. Being able to understand and set up those boundaries. Boundaries are very, very important. And being able to, again, to learn to say no. A lot of us struggle in that area, but being okay with saying no, understanding when you need to say no, understand when we can't be a part of something. I understand, as I spoke earlier about, in our careers, we're set up. We're told from our parents early on, work hard, you have all of these generational things that you have to continue to deal with, but being able to say, you know what, that doesn't work for me. That's not good for me. I can't become involved in that. And I just repeat that over and over again. And I think it's me understanding and setting what my boundaries, but also understanding what my tolerance level is and what I have the ability and even the energy to fight for. Sometimes I get tired of fighting. But instead of me continuing to fight, being able to step back and say, you know, right now, I have to let my sister girl take over that because I just don't have the capacity to deal with that.
And I echo that with the boundaries. I'm a big believer in the fact that martyrdom is not necessary for womanhood. That's something that I say on a daily basis with pride. I feel like it's something that we, particularly Black women, have sort of taken on. I was thinking about, I was wearing my little cameo today that I found that was a Black woman. I was like, let me rep today. So what I find is that there's become like this badge of honor for Black women that martyrdom is necessary for progress, and it's not. It happens to be what has occurred, but it is not required for progress. And so we want to be really clear about, again, boundaries, about naming what we need, about discovering who our allies are, and that we can kind of fall back when we need to if we're finding that the people who look like us or might even be in our home aren't for us. And so we need to figure out what that means. That might mean therapy, it might mean support, it might mean going to your friends, it might mean, you know, all types of ways to care for yourself. But there is not this, that you have to relegate yourself to self-destruction. And so I think that that's the biggest thing that I would say is just making sure we reach out for support and that we recognize. The other piece I will say really quickly is that going to a therapist or talking about mental health is not a rejection of your faith. Let me be clear about that. You can have, I want to say that I'm a pastor's kid, but I will say to you as a therapist that I have to say that so many times in our community. It's not woo-woo, it's not the devil. Like, you want to see about yourself. All of you, if you have a cold or some kind of other physical ailment, most of you are going to go to a healthcare provider without shame. It's, if I can guess on that one. And so the same thing happens with our health. Mental health is a part of comprehensive wellness. So you going to see someone to take care of yourself does not mean you are crazy. It does not mean you are insane. It does not mean you don't love Jesus, Buddha, Allah, anybody else that you see as the divine in your life is not separated from you because you are going to a professional to help you through a difficult time. So that's something I will really say, is to make sure that we step away from this idea that we can't care for ourselves and that it is a rejection of others or our spiritual beliefs.
Thank you very much. And we've just been joined by State Senator Nikki Merritt. And I will just restate one of the questions we were covering just now is what are some ways that Black women in dealing with systems and then dealing with their neighborhoods, their communities and families, how to address some of the harm that we experience even in our own communities.
Right, and I think what you touched on, a lot of times we do go to our faith communities when that's what we have historically done. And I don't know what we've gone over and what's been said or what's not, but I just want to say it's releasing that stigma of I need help. And I think Black women sometimes it's being perceived as weakness when we say or when we want to express a vulnerability. I don't know if we touched on the the strong Black woman. I want to get rid of that catchphrase. Yes. Right? Because I think that's what we're talking about. Yeah, we all know we're strong women. That's not the question, but it's also it has made it so that we cannot express our vulnerabilities in a way where we're being heard because we're supposed to be, we're not supposed to have weakness. And, just being able to express a vulnerability, it just says, hey, I need help. I'm not looking for a handout, but I need help here. I'm struggling emotionally with something. And that's not always fostered in our communities because, again, we somehow have thought of that as a place of weakness. But I think when we are able to express that and are able to say, hey, I need help, and then we have these environments or we have programs where we can extend that help to Black women, I think we can start releasing some of those stigmas and making sure that it's okay to say it. So I'm jumping in the middle. I don't know if that answers the question, but yeah.
So what are some of the ways that policy has shown up for Black women? The Crown Act comes to mind, addressing hair discrimination in the workplace, Black women's maternal health, but are there any, or you can expound upon those, but are there any other policies or laws that have shown up for us that you'd like to highlight or discuss?
I actually think they don't show up enough. We do have the Crown Act, which helps us with discrimination in the workplace against our hair because, I feel like Black women are often attacked, and we know this because it's in the media, about everything that's external to us, whether it's our sexuality, whether it's our hair. The Crown Act was supposed to deal with the part about discrimination against our hair and being able to express that. I do think we could do some more in the criminal justice area. Oftentimes, women, sometimes get caught up in sex trafficking. For women in general get caught up in that. And sometimes it's for survival. Sometimes, again, it is because the mental supports or the mental health supports or the healthiness in the family hasn't been there. And oftentimes what we find is laws that overly criminalize without being sensitive to, hey, this person might have needed additional help, or there might have been a reason why they were involved in the activity, maybe unhealthiness in the home, and then we know some of that can be systemically based. Of course, expanding access to Medicaid is big because that's going to give more low-income families access to health care. It will give more Black families, Black women access to health care, and we still have not been able to do that in the state. I think we should see policies where we address mental health at the education level, K through 12. That's where we should start. We should start the dismantling there. And that's policies that I think the state could be funding and forwarding. We should have more mental health systems in place that the state could allocate funds for our areas that are in most need. In our Black communities, and we have not done very well in that area as well as the state. So I just think there hasn't been enough, and there is more that we can do. We appreciate what we're given is what I call it. It's like all of a sudden down at the legislature, they pay attention to, oh, we haven't done anything for Black people. We just had a bill that I'll just mention as I close. We had a bill that kind of reduced the requirements for washing hair, cosmetology. It sounds really great. Yeah, and all of a sudden, all of my colleagues on the other side were invoking Black women in this conversation, whereas we still have not passed the Crown Act. But all of a sudden, they care about our licensing with our hair and who gets the shampoo hair at what required level of licensing. So it's things like that kind of are troubling, and there are other things we could be addressing. But yeah.
And I would just echo, when I think about this, I think about all areas and aspects of life for Black women. I think about, pay inequity. I think about, obviously, the Crown Act and things like that. But just, maternal health, just public health across the board. We're looking at housing. We're looking at education, all these things that I feel like we have made like sort of these tiny steps forward, but I do feel like there's a backsliding that is occurring and trying to fight for those things. So my profession is clinical social work, and I'm the president of the Georgia Society of Clinical Social Work here. And one of the things that we're excited about, which has just moved over and hopefully will be passed here and move on to other states, is just having interstate compacts that allow more therapists to be able to practice across state lines, because there's such a shortage of therapists, of psychiatrists, and even more of color. And so like those things like that, they're being introduced, but how do we sort of advocate to get those things to actually being passed and enacted so we can see the benefits of that. But yeah, there's just so many areas that we still need policy to show up for us. One of the things I always think about is that we're already belonging to marginalized groups, and then Black women are being further pressed and pushed to the edge of those margins. And I'm like, how much further can we go before you think about this stage, you fall off, and now what we land in is erasure and invisibility, right? So that's what's happening. So we have to just kind of, unfortunately, as exhausted as we are, is to keep showing up to name how these policies are important for us to live whole lives. And so we know that when Black women have healthy minds and have healthy bodies, then communities do as well. And that's just at the micro level, then the meso level, and then globally, right? If we're seeing Black women be healthier, then we know that healthier change is going to be far-reaching.
No, that's great information, and I definitely, as a clinician as well as a therapist, I definitely really appreciate Dr. Ford's comment on the compact. But I also think because of that, we need to have policies in place to protect when you need to make sure that you have licensed professionals to safeguard the mental health space. We know when COVID hit, it perpetuated. Everybody became a mental health therapist. All of the organizations, because it became very lucrative, they started opening up all of these mental health online platforms for telehealth. And even in that, I did just a personal study just to see what would it take for an individual to work for one of those entities. So I signed up as a licensed clinician. They didn't ask me for my license. They just asked me for my experience. They didn't ask me what state I was licensed in, which is Georgia, but allowed me and others, I'm sure, to see people all across the country. And it's because of the compact. The compact has not been established for licensed professional counselors yet. The application's not even out there. So that does not safeguard the mental health well-being of our people, because it's easier, it's more lucrative for companies, and it's cheaper sometimes for individuals to seek that level of help. So I go back to policies that put education and awareness into place, where we can educate our own communities. We need to be speaking loud and clear to destigmatize mental health in African American communities. The project that I lead at Morehouse School of Medicine is the African American Behavioral Health Center of Excellence, and we're in the 4th year of a 5-year grant. This is the first center ever in the country. And in order to get this particular center, there were centers for Hispanics, there were centers for Native Americans, there was just no center that focused on the behavioral health disparities for African American. We had to lobby, had to have someone from the Black Caucus lobby for this funding to become in existence for our center. And thank God we at Morehouse School of Medicine won the grant. But I say all of that to say, each of us hold a space and a place. Yes, you can go and talk to your politicians, but if you don't have the proper knowledge, how are you going to educate them on what is happening in our communities? So I say that we start destigmatizing, and it starts with us in our own families. It starts with understanding what mental health it really is, what the disorders are, but seeking professional assistance and being okay with that. But also going back and telling your girlfriend, your sisterhood communities, that we need to raise the bar for each other, not fight against each other, but work together. So I'll be calling you, Dr. Ford.
Thank you for that. And I just wanted to add, I'm a proponent of therapy, and if you feel crazy, sometimes because what we're living under, it is crazy. So it's okay if you feel that, in that moment. I feel like that's very warranted because we're under way more than we ever, give ourselves credit for. And that leads me to the closing question I was going to throw in there. Can you talk to us about, your own personal self-care and what you do, to support your mental health? Sometimes it might be, something, that's obviously traumatic happening, but then there just might be those times where it's just a moment that, turns on where you feel completely overwhelmed about something. So can you just share, what do you personally do when you're personally in those moments?
Do you want me to start?
Yeah, we could start.
Yes, and often, in my capacity, I find myself very frustrated, especially as I see a lot of our issues not being addressed in a way that I think is caring and understanding. We put forth policies that, are nothing burgers to me, yet we are failing to address issues of housing, issues of mental health with women, maternity mortality rate. So it is stressful, and I see it happening in real time. So oftentimes what I have to do is go to a quiet place and just meditate and pray about it. A lot of times I've just been like, why am I here? Because everything that I want to put forward is just getting overridden by the majority, and it's not helping any of our people. So I just have to take a pause, meditate, remember why I'm in this space and for whom I'm in this space. So I have to just really step back and tap back into my heart and the love I have for people. I have to just have some quiet time to reflect on that and do that. And I have a coach that I do have to rely on sometimes. That is often my counselor of empowerment and of you're okay, you're human, and it's okay to be sensitive with yourself. It's okay to know that you're not going to be the best at everything or say the right thing all the time, or but just know that you are in a space of empowerment, and if you weren't supposed to be there, you wouldn't be there. So I just have someone to have in my corner to reflect back on why I'm here. And my mother is a great support. I'm thankful to have my mom. She's still alive. She's coming up on 75. So she's lived through an era of Jim Crow and everything in between. And she's a very strong woman. She graduated from Spelman here. That's how we ended up here in Atlanta. So I do lean on my mom a lot when I'm having those struggles as well. But she and I also acknowledge the unhealthiness that we were raised with because of some of the post-traumatic stress that we have had generationally, starting from slavery, and how we treat each other. Like, for instance, and I know I'm going off a tangent, but just with our daughters, sometimes we have to be careful about, are we speaking to them in a way that says, hey, you got to be tough, you got to be strong? Do we do things that maybe seem a little bit mean and like we're pushing them off? And I think that's something we've learned through the stresses of slavery, because our children weren't even our own. And I think we continue to carry that. So my mom and I do have discussions about how we show up with each other and how we show up with, and how I show up with my daughter. And we often have to talk about that and really pray about that in a space of togetherness and supportiveness of women. So that's what we do. I use the support of my family and the women in my family and women who are in my corner.
Thank you.
I want to give you my microphone. Because I'm used to doing that. I'm used to like giving microphones.
Now, I agree. One of the things I will say is I think you have to first start with self-awareness, right? I think there has to be, again, like that checking in with yourself, some self-reflection. And then I feel like the next big piece, particularly for Black women, is permission. That you are going to give yourself permission to rest, permission to have self-care, to not put, it's a really odd occurrence. There's we pathologize rest, but we're cool with like going beyond exhaustion. So for me, a big thing for me is humor. That's, something I do a lot of laughing. Movement is very important to me, whether that's dancing or fitness or whatever silliness that may entail. And I think it's community. I think trying to find that balance too between having the solitude to self-reflect and get quiet and have self-compassion and be soft with yourself and be honest with yourself, but also not isolating yourself to the point where you aren't connecting with the people that fill you up. I know I have my little crew. I'm originally from Illinois and had the luxury of coming to the South and falling in love with lots of people and coming back here. But, my crew is very important to me. Is it them speaking, telling me the truth or encouraging me or whatever the case may be. But yeah, whether that's accessing family, friends, having your own coach or therapist, or if it's someone in your faith-based community, whatever the case may be, but to recognize that whatever that committee or group is, that you can expand it. That's one thing I talk to people a lot about in therapy, is that they feel like if they've had maybe a friend since 4th grade, that they, even if that's unhealthy, they can't let it go. And if that person is no longer aligned with who you are becoming or have become, that it's okay to expand community. So just making sure that we're giving ourselves permission. My other favorite sentence to say to myself and share with others, and I'll give it to you today, is I don't have to. It's a little teeny sentence, but it is powerful. How many of you are doing things that you think you have to do, and when you fall back and get really, really quiet, you're like, I don't even have to do that. So I will give you that. That is your prize for today, that you get to walk away and live in your lives and in your stories with the recognition that there are so many things that you do not have to do because of tradition or somebody always done it or somebody always told you had to, but to again get really quiet with, who am I today? What do I need today? How can I be well in this moment? Those are other just very small statements that you can do and live by moment. So I'd encourage you to do that. So that's for me. I also love to travel. My credit card probably does not appreciate that. But that's one of my favorite things too, is just to kind of get out and explore. And I think that that's another way of expanding how we show up in the world when we see other communities and other women doing things in different ways.
And I echo all of that, and definitely the part around the credit card, but mine is not necessarily for travel. Mine is, this may sound so crazy, but I love to clean. I probably buy more pillows and more wall decorations, pictures than probably anybody in the room. And so my credit card is a reflection of that, but that gives me some greatest peace. I really enjoy being in my space. I really enjoy having a very clean and organized space. Definitely would not give myself the mental disorder of OCD, but I do like to have a clean space because it creates peace for me. It creates a level of energy for me. Definitely my sisterhood community. I was sitting there today, and as I was listening to all of the panels before ours, and I just went on my Instagram and I just looked at all the powerful Black women who were here, who came before us, and I have the pleasure of being with today. And I just put something on my social media around the power of sisterhood, the power of community. That is important for me. And so just getting to a quiet space, I asked one of my girlfriends the other day, I said, who are you when you're not in the space of where other people can see you? And so walking and being in my truth, and I dance, I drop it like it hot, I twerk, I can't dance, but that's fine for me. That's me dispelling my energy in a space that can propel me higher, and giving myself, as Dr. Ford indicated, permission to say, I don't have to do this today, so I won't be in tomorrow. Y'all don't have to come in tomorrow. But at the same time, for a long time, I worked tirelessly And now giving myself permission to utilize my vacation days. And knowing that, guess what? When I come back, the work is still there. But I had a reminder been a few months ago. There was an individual who worked at the university and been at the university almost 17 years now. And she had been there and she was working in the custodial space. And she passed away, and as we were on one of our meetings, our town halls, we memorialized her for 5 minutes. But really it was 3.5 because I set my timer. And we continued on with our business. No reflection because we had to do what we needed to do because it was a meeting. But I started to sit there and I started to think about myself and how I'm sometimes standing my own way, and realize that even after me, they're going to give me 3.5 minutes and the work is going to continue on. So if I don't take the necessary steps that I need to take to care for Dawn, who will? So I say to you today, she's giving you one charge, and I'm giving you another charge, is to do what you need to do for yourself so you can show up every day as your best self.
Thank you very much. So thank you so much, Dr. Tyus, Professor Shakira Ford, and State Senator Nikki Merritt for a wonderful discussion, and we appreciate all of your intelligence and everything you had to offer us today. Thank you.
Thank you.